So
I forgot one major thing, is we are going to be voting whether to support the renewal levy or not today. So I have ballots here that'll move fairly quickly once the questions are done. But also, ask as many questions as possible while we have her here. Excuse me.
So I'll talk fast. I got a short PowerPoint, and then we can have dialogue and questions. Okay, let me start moving this to the practice. All right, we're doing okay. These days, as Peg said, we're keenly aware standards have changed and our competition has changed, and we truly do need to make sure that our youngsters are able to compete in the world market. And things have gotten much more rigorous. We're going with Common Core standards, which is really basically a nationwide curriculum that's a lot more rigorous. So we truly do have a very, very big job on our hands. When I was considered for the superintendent's position in 2009, I was asked to lay out my vision, and I did, and I think we should go back and revisit it, and let's see how far we've come, but also what the challenges are that still remain. My first vision was academic success, because our district had failing scores for way too long, especially in some of our very poor schools in very poor neighborhoods. And in the past 4 years, we've improved. We still have a long way to go. We are the highest rated urban district and did get the effective rating for 2 years in a row, but we still have a lot of work to do. But we are definitely improving. In terms of this year, we have picked up one more indicator on the state report card that hasn't been released yet. But probably the most important thing to me is there's been a third grade reading guarantee passed in the state of Ohio by the governor. It basically says if our youngsters aren't at a certain level, they cannot go on. And there's terrible statistics out there that say if youngsters are retained, their chances of graduating from high school greatly go down. So we don't want any of our children retained at third grade. Right now, the state standard is 75% of our youngsters have to be proficient. This year we've come up to 74% proficient. And just because we were so concerned, we have hired a reading specialist in every one of our elementary schools to make sure that children aren't falling through the cracks. And we were able to do that because the governor allowed us to use our supplemental education dollars that were going to, nice partners like Boys and Girls Clubs and the YMCAs, but their expertise isn't necessarily teaching reading. So we were able to reallocate those funds and hire 37 reading specialists. So we feel very comfortable that we're not going to have huge numbers of youngsters retained at third grade. In terms of performance index, that's almost like your grade at the end of the year. If you take every child who takes a test at the 24 tests at the 8 different grade levels, that's kind of your final grade, and it is a little more than a point higher than last year. It shows we're still making progress. Now, also my vision was for financial stability. That one's, believe it or not, has been trickier than the academic one. We have, I think the recession was responsible for that. So right now, we haven't given employee raises for 4 years. They've picked up 20% of their health care costs. Our budget is still balanced. However, we are very concerned because we are living in Cincinnati on emergency 5-year renewals that just keep coming up every 5 years. A lot of districts in the state, I didn't realize it, I just assumed that this was statewide, but the urban districts do meet in Columbus on a regular basis, and they asked, well, who's got a levy on the ballot? And Cleveland had one, and Columbus has one in the spring. I said, well, we have a renewal. They said, a renewal? What's that? I said, well, it's the 5-year emergency renewal that's coming up. And they all just kind of looked at me and said, well, we don't live on those kinds. When we pass a levy, it's continual. So I truly didn't realize that, but our part of the state, that's kind of the norm, which is awful when these come up in the middle of bad economic times. This is a renewal. It's 11% of our operating budget. It's $51 million. So This would be 51 million on top of the cuts we've already made. You know, and obviously we're very concerned because it's vital to our fiscal stability, but also, you know, we provide services to private parochial charter schools like transportation. And that's the first thing that suburban districts seem to cut. But how can you educate a child if you can't even get them to school? So our poor families don't have a way to get youngsters to school. So we are very concerned. And also, you know, Ohio is probably the most generous state in the country in terms of giving dollars to private and parochial schools. We have a very generous system in Ohio supporting all of our children, which is certainly appropriate. Also, innovation. We knew we had to change. And if we wanted to keep our market share, and trust me, I never thought the word market share and ranking our district would come out of my mouth. But these days, literally, that's what you have to do. Because there's a lot of for-profit charters and there's a lot of competition out there these days. So you have to be conscious of all of that. Oh, thank you. All right. So in fact, that picture you saw right at the beginning, you know, the logo for our district always had been children's hands, of different color hands coming together to make the star. Well, someone in our public affairs department actually made the star with real children's hands, which is a beautiful logo, and that's what that first picture was. Now, we've done focus groups with parents, we've asked communities what they would like, so we started a gifted academy, a digital academy, because believe it or not, we had children logging online to a for-profit charter in Akron. So we thought, now that's pretty silly. We should have them log on online to our teachers here in Cincinnati. So as we discover areas where we can expand or keep our market share, that's what we do. We have signed an MOU with Sept, that is the residential boarding school. They have one in Baltimore. They wish to come. They have moved back their start date to 14/15 because they're actually leasing the Heinold site from us on Baltimore and Westwood Northern, and they're going to build dorms. The youngsters will stay there. They'll come Sunday night, stay there through Friday evening, and go home. And we're actually sponsoring them, but they are raising private dollars to build the dormitories, etc. So we're trying to do a lot of public-private partnerships. Also, collaboration. We're just so blessed in the district. There's so many community partners who work with us to improve the situation of our families, which obviously improves the situation of the children that we serve. We're also trying to work with our Cincinnati Federation of Teachers to actually ask them to help us balance our budget, and that's why they have stepped up to the plate and are paying more in health care and haven't had pay raises. This will be the 5th year because we've said that we cannot balance a budget unless that occurs. All right, now that I've shared a high-level overview, let's talk about the basics. Peg kind of mentioned earlier, here's the stats for the district. We're a little under 33 this year just because the birth rate's down and we continue to decline slightly in the city. As Peg alluded to before, we had been at 69% free and reduced lunch rate, which really is your percent of poverty in the district for about a decade. Since the recession, we have ticked up to 73% this year. So it has gone up 4 percentage points just in the last 2 years. So it shows that our families really have gotten poorer. And 21% of our students, we have 8,000 youngsters in our district who are students with disabilities. And they are very, very costly to educate. And they do take the state test and are counted in our test scores. But that does drive up the cost, the per pupil cost of serving our youngsters. We have 54 schools, greatly downsized. Just a decade ago, we had 72 schools. And I know some of you who are in Cincinnati can remember when we had 100 schools back in the 50s. But that just speaks to the declining population in the city, and we have been downsizing, adjusting, closing schools because you can't afford to operate a lot of really small schools. We figured out it takes about 400 students in a building to really make it economically feasible. And we have various combinations of schools depending on what the neighborhood likes. For instance, Euler and Riverview East are K-12 schools. When we discovered youngsters did not were not leaving the neighborhood to go to high school. So we created K-12 schools because we saw that those youngsters were dropping out, and we could ill afford to have that happen. We also, we're also looking at converting a lot of our high schools to 7 through 12 schools, because with the increase in rigor with the state standards, we would like our youngsters at 7th and 8th grade to start picking up math, science, English credits in order to graduate. And we've looked at our stats, and our youngsters in our 7 through 12 high schools seem to perform well or better than the youngsters in K-8 schools. And a lot of it is in our K-8 schools, they're just taught by a general ed teacher and not someone with a degree in math, and we cannot start letting them pick up high school credits. So we're slowly moving most of our schools to K-12, 7 through 12, except the ones that are K-12. You never can do anything 100% in a district when you've got 90 square miles and lots of different communities, and in terms of buildings of different sizes, you really just have to try to customize what you can based on what the community needs or wants. But that is the direction we are going in. All right, academic gains. As you can see, we have come a long way. We started out in academic emergency, and we didn't come up overnight. I mean, it has been a long haul to get to where we currently are. One of the reasons we improved academically is we took a look at the 16 struggling schools in our poorest neighborhoods, and those were the schools who hadn't met any of their federal targets ever in the past 10 years. So when I realized a child could start off in kindergarten, graduate at 8th grade, and never have met a target in these schools, we figured we have to do something. So we put additional resources into those buildings, and I was very fortunate at that point in time. We had some stimulus dollars, so we put extra resources in those buildings, and those buildings have improved. And we did redesign 4 of those buildings that we felt we really couldn't improve the climate with the staff and the way it was, and we started over. And recently we also closed Quebec High School, which had been an academic emergency for 10 years. Of those 16 schools, 14 did move out of academic emergency, so you can see they have moved up. And the fact that they moved up, it helped improve our district as a whole. So we put the monies in our struggling schools. And when we did it because it was the right thing to do. I had no idea how that would boost the district until I saw those. After the first year, I thought, oh my gosh, this really makes a difference overall. But we did it not for that reason. We did it because how can you leave children in struggling schools? Now, the progress in CP hasn't just been on academics. We're in the final stages of a facility master plan. We are so fortunate that about 10 years ago, a bond issue, a capital bond issue that can't be used for operations, was passed by our taxpayers, and that combined with the tobacco lawsuit that occurred in Ohio, we got dollars to redo our schools, which was wonderful because Ohio had some of the oldest school buildings in the country, and Cincinnati had some of the oldest school buildings in the state. And these are not cookie cutter buildings. Each one is different. We've gone out, worked with the community to design their buildings, because the last thing we wanted was some cinder block building in a residential neighborhood, because we knew that that wasn't the right thing to do. So we worked with the communities. They helped design the buildings. They're all different. You know, I remember 30 years ago, I started in a building where they had hired one architect, bought one building plan, then changed the color of the brick and where it was oriented on the lot. And so you had half a dozen buildings that looked exactly the same. We did not do that. Had a lot of struggle with the High School Facilities Commission because their plan was for a cinder block building and 5 acres in a cornfield. And we said, we're in residential neighborhoods, you just can't do that. You have to work with your community. So this year, we opened 5 new buildings just at the start of this year. And this is we're at the end of our plan right now. So you can see Mount Washington, Euler, Western Hills, we are doing it wing by wing. Westwood and Woodford, Paideia, and Parker Woods, which is right now Winton Montessori on Winton Road. They're going to be moving over Veterans Day, as is Salem Park. Salem Park has been on site, but they've been in those modular units out back. And it was great going around. In fact, I can kind of let you see what I saw on the first day. That's beautiful. Mount Washington School looks like a castle. You know, we had a terrible argument with OSFC because if it costs like 2/3 to renovate, they want you to tear down and start over. Well, how can you tear down historically significant buildings? So we just had huge arguments and had to pick up a lot of the cost ourselves, locally funded, because it didn't fit with their plan. But I mean, that's a gorgeous building that looks like a castle, and it truly is beautiful. And I have to say, the architects go back, and there's a lot of green in it because that was the color when the school was built, so they try to make it look very historic. But they are 21st century learning environments. It's just lots of natural light. You have some, a whiteboard in the classroom. You see they kept the old knight in shining armor there in the hallway when you first come in. Woodford Paideia, this is a gorgeous one over in Kennedy Heights. And in fact, they had to cut down some trees on the property to build Woodford. So they took, a cross section of the tree that they had to cut down in the front lawn, and they have it on the wall when you come into the building because the tree had to go in order to do the new school. And Woodford had been one of those schools. Now, this was actually a newer school built in the 60s, one of those schools without walls where everything was open. So when you go in, you'd see like all these file cabinets and everything like stacked up as barriers as the teachers tried to create walls in the building. Not the best model. I know Marymount had one of those too because I know that they were redoing it. So sometimes it's just not good to jump on the fads because 20, 30, 40 years later, the folks who come after you are living with it. So I'm trying no fads. Western Hills High School, we're doing the various wings. Yes, we are putting the beautiful pastoral murals back up on the walls, so to make sure we're putting everything back. But it's amazing what they can do with lighting these days, because a lot of these older buildings, the halls are just so dark, and now they have a way to put the light up on the ceiling, and however they do it, it suddenly is so much brighter and lighter. That was the first thing I noticed when I went into West High. I thought, my gosh, because the lockers were kind of like burgundy curtains here. So you can imagine you've got hallways with lockers that color, and the floor tile, how dark it was. So it's just amazing what they can do these days. And the last one is Westwood, and some of you probably live in Westwood, and there was lots of discussion. We could not tear down Westwood, but we needed a new gym for the youngsters, and there was lots of controversy about what side of the building to put the gym on. But in the end, it's on the side by the businesses on the street, and the brick, when I was over there, matches. It looks like, thank heavens, it's been there forever. I was worried when I went by during construction, and it was that awful concrete with that pink insulation on it. I went, oh my gosh, this is an eyesore. The community was right, they'll never forgive us. But now that the brick is on, it looks beautiful, it matches, and it truly looks lovely. And there's a group, in fact, they're having their little dedication tonight. The bell and the clock that they preserve, they have in this beautiful, it's a giant-sized glass case right there in the connector between the old building and where the gym connects. It truly is beautiful, and they're doing a dedication today. Euler, my gosh, that was a huge project. It's fabulous, and Euler has incredible partners. They have a health center. They're going to have an eye clinic. They have an early learning center for preschool students that Patty Gleason runs in the building. So the community has really come around there. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, there is Euler. Now that is a building, let me tell you. Some of them were easier to remodel than others, but I'm trying to think of either one of those. I think one of them is there's the clinic, and they're going to have an eyeglass clinic there too. Lens Crafters is a wonderful partner. They test the vision of all of our youngsters and those who can't afford glasses. They actually provide glasses for them, but it was like they did it once a year in December, and they needed a big venue. They've been going to Union Terminal, where you can bring hundreds and hundreds of students through like in a week's time to get everyone through. But the problem is, once that's over, that's kind of it until the next year. Well, now with this Vision Center, if a youngster enrolls in February February or March, you don't have to wait until the next December, because we do have an eye clinic for the youngsters in the district. We also have tried in these new buildings to go green with that leadership in environmental and energy design. And we have 21 LEED registered schools, which is more than any in the state of Ohio. And we have a lot of silver LEED, but we also have a gold and a platinum, which is really hard to get. We're still trying to deal with the city to let Dater hook up the rainwater cistern so we can flush our toilets. But I think the city wants the money, because you know how your water bill's based on, sewage and the money. They don't want us to connect. So I think I told you that a year ago, we still haven't gotten it connected. So we're still trying to deal with the city and the cistern, because we wanted to use rainwater to flush toilets, etc., which was part of the gold LEED certification, but that still is hanging out there. And Taft got a platinum. Taft High School, which is right down the street here, they have actually a vegetative or green roof. Also, Clark in Hyde Park has a green roof, and that one you can actually walk out on, which is pretty cool because it's kind of built into a hill. Now, even though we've made lots of progress, we still have some challenges. We have achievement gaps that still exist. We have noticed that when we take a look at our data, our students with disabilities lag, and our African American male students lag. Not the girls, but our young men. So we have created African American young men's club called MORE, which stands for Men Organized, Respectful, and Educated, to help our young men make the right choices. So in addition to dealing with academic issues, we also need to build character and help them make the right choices. And we're very, very aware that with this new Common Core, which are the new standards that are coming out, our youngsters are going to struggle. There's going to be a huge emphasis. Right now we read a lot of fiction in schools. They're going to go to much more technical reading, nonfiction, and we have to make sure that we prepare our youngsters for these new standards that are coming so that they don't fall behind. These are some of the skills our youngsters most definitely need to have. We are very fortunate in that we do have some wonderful partners. The GE Foundation and the GE in Evendale have been a great help in working with the district to try to improve our math and science scores, because they're very concerned about the workforce of the future being right up the road. So they have they've given us expertise and dollars and have been very generous. Also, our priorities in the district, we're very aware when about half of our youngsters come to kindergarten ready, knowing their colors, counting to 10, being able to write their names. That is a huge issue. We do have preschools in virtually almost all of our elementary buildings, but there is a huge waiting list. There aren't enough preschool seats. It is not funded by the state. We've had to cobble together grants and some Title I dollars to make sure that we have a preschool in our low-performing schools, but we need more seats. We have a waiting list of several hundred people, and we do notice youngsters who have a preschool background taught by a licensed teacher. You can tell those youngsters on the first day of school versus when they come to kindergarten versus the youngsters who've had no preschool. It makes a huge difference. And when we look at our test data, youngsters who start with us in preschool and stay through third grade do a lot better on our third grade test than those youngsters who weren't in preschool and maybe moved from charter schools back and forth. So if they come to us early and stay with us, we are able to make a difference academically. Also, fifth quarter, we try to run an extra month of school for youngsters in June, just because we know that some youngsters need more time in school. So we do offer a fifth quarter in those 16 struggling schools every summer. And we do have, we call our buildings community learning centers with a resource coordinator to bring in the tutors and other resources like the eye clinic that our struggling schools really need. This year our priority was early literacy with that third grade guarantee, we had to do something because right now the state requires by the end of this month, we have to have tested all of our youngsters at K-3 and identify those who are struggling, diagnose what the problem is, and come up with a plan. So fortunately, we had teachers who, over the years, we've been offering Orton Gillingham and letters training. So when we found out on June 30th this law had been passed, I was able to go to the Marison Academy, our PD Academy, and say, could you give me the list of all the teachers with specialized reading training? We had to send them letters at their homes in the month of July saying, would you like to apply for one of these positions? We had 3 interview committees, and we got our 37 people up and running. But sometimes these days, the state doesn't give you a lot of lead time. A lot gets put in the budget bill that's done in the state on June 30th. A lot of other items get put in those budget bills that can blindside you and leave you scrambling in the middle of summer to get up to speed. And this third grade guarantee started immediately. And usually there's, you get like a year to prepare, but this was, the governor wanted it to start immediately. So we were scrambling, and also I mentioned our 7 through 12 high schools, and in fact, I'm going to stop right there. And there's that great picture I talked about with our youngsters. All right, questions? Yes?
It took me since Presbyterian Cincinnati. The MORE programs you mentioned, I was curious about, are those expanding, and can community, like faith communities, volunteer to sponsor those?
We would love that because we don't have enough money. Yes, we're trying to expand them beyond the first 10. And yes, we need more men to step up and help us, to be honest with you. That and a little bit of funding for the activities. Because honestly, those young men have been the best PR. When I went to the Silverton Bear Luncheon, here's all these 6th graders in shirts and ties, meeting and greeting everyone at the door and handing out the program. I went to Woodward, there was an event, they had the Bulldog Blue, they had sweater vests on and ties, the same thing, meeting and greeting everyone. And honestly, you couldn't pay for that kind of PR when you see all the young people meeting, greeting, looking appropriate, acting appropriately. Yes, we need help. We need more men and a little bit of funding just for all the activities. And we've had some of our staff donate the ties and everything, so all the young men have ties.
Connie Whitman from your Archdiocese. On this third grade reading guarantee, and you mentioned you have to diagnose the students and set up programs to help them and all, and then how's it measured at the end?
It'll be on the third grade Ohio Achievement Test. They're going to set, in fact, just yesterday at 4 o'clock, the state board set the cut score. So we didn't even know what the score would have to be. If you don't get a 390 on the third grade reading test, and next year it's 392, so they're gradually going to move it up, then that's what triggers that in the spring. Then you take the test, find out in May the child hasn't made it. And so, we're going to start having those conversations with the youngsters we identify as struggling. So the parent just doesn't find out in May.
So the test will remain the same type as it has been?
Yes. Yes, it's the third grade reading test. And they just determined the cut score yesterday at our meeting. Bob. Oh, Dan, I'm sorry.
No, back here.
Back there, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, Dave T. Sarge, Christ. This renewal levy, this is a renewal levy coming
It's a
up?
renewal, will not raise taxes.
Okay. Why?
I'm told to say it. Every time I say renewal, will not raise taxes. In fact, according to Dusty Rose, don't even ask me how it happens, it actually drops by $10 the amount, because somehow with the evaluation adjustment, you'll pay $10 less if you vote for it. And it's issue 42, so it's renewed 42. We just got the number this week.
Okay. But if nobody else in Ohio is doing emergency renewals like this, is there a particular reason why you didn't make it a permanent?
I would love to, but you're so afraid because it can't be a renewal if I try to make it permanent. It has to be new money. And it's just so hard to get that message out. I know sometime you got to break the cycle. We were so afraid to try to. It has to go on. Yeah, right now it's a renewal. If I try to make it permanent, I can't call it a renewal. They'll call it a new levy. And then how do you communicate that it's really a renewal that's been turned
Because
into
the renewal's
something.
gonna expire, and this is gonna be a new levy that's gonna be the same rate or whatever.
I know, we were just so afraid, because if you lose 11% more of your funding, we would truly
So just
close
basically, it's
the
fair,
doors.
wouldn't
But
pass.
that's what it is. But you're right, at some point in time, you have to break the cycle. But somehow we kind of felt in this economic climate, probably not the time to do it.
Okay.
Bob Anderson, Archdiocese of Cincinnati. Glad to have you here.
Hi, Bob.
Question on your presentation, and then I'll follow up related to that. When you talked about turnaround results, were those based on 2011 report card scores or preliminary expectations of 2012?
It's last year's, because
Okay.
since the state's not issuing the report card,
Right.
we've been told we can't share where, that performance index is this year's, because I
Right.
felt comfortable sharing that. Although I can tell you, since the end of July, I've got 3 different draft final ones. One was the 88.5. I said, oh, I'm so happy. Then it went down to 88.4. Now it's back up to 88.5. So, I mean, but at least it didn't change much. So it's interesting. And in fact, we think when they released it to the press, they had forgot to count the third graders who passed the October test, because my pass rate dropped from 74 to 71. It's back up at 74, because we think they forgot to count the October children. And that's just scary when ODE makes those kinds
And I
of
want to just
mistakes.
relate it, once I have that answer, as a parent, like Dan, of CPS students, we're concerned about what the new ratings will be. I mean, you've alluded to already, it might be continuous improvement. We
Yes.
know that's the case probably in some other schools, they may be going down, though I know from our direct experience, principals and administrators are not creating those expectations to at least get people aware that this may be happening, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, but here's how it's working. But if it does go down for the district to continuous improvement, what do you think that means, how are you going to message that?
You're right. It is hard to explain that we're a point higher on the performance index, so our final grade's higher. We got extra credit points, so to speak, last year for value added, because we added so much growth to our struggling schools. We don't know what those extra credit points will look like this year, and apparently yesterday at the state board, they're saying we can now, they're not even sure if they're going to release a report card, because they're caught in this dilemma, because there was that mess in Laughlin with enrollments and withdrawals, plus the governor had created a report card in the budget bill in June that was going to rank schools from A to F. Then the legislature got mad at the governor because they had been working on it, and the governor slipped it in to the budget bill. So that angered the legislators, who said, well, House Bill 555 is going to move forward because it's our purview to do it. So there's been all this fighting in Columbus, and then with the Common Core and the new standards, everyone knows everyone's going to drop. So they're trying to figure out when they're going to do the new report card. So right now, we've been told we don't think they're going to issue us an overall report card. We'll have just individual school, we're not even sure what it's going to look like. The board, State Board of Education met all day yesterday. They set the third grade guarantee score, said they weren't going to issue a report card. I haven't even been able to talk to my evaluation person to say, well, what can we release? Is it the spreadsheet or what is it? So what I showed you there, except for the 88.5, I felt comfortable doing that. We don't even know. We don't think there's going to be a report card. So this is just the most bizarre year. And again, I say, what really scares me is when they make things so high stakes, like this third grade guarantee. When they gave me 3 different draft final report cards, one the last week in July, one the second week in August when the press did an open records request. I think someone quickly ran it and forgot to include all the data, and now we have a third one. And they changed. That just makes you so nervous that you might be holding children back based on, and this EMIS system is kind of an antiquated system. We're sending millions of data points to some place, and then they send them to ODE, and then supposedly they shoot it out, and then ODE sends them back to this data place somewhere in Ohio, who sends them back to us, and you're moving millions of data points, and it's just kind of, you just never want a child to be hurt by that. So that's the latest. Probably not I don't even know how that's going to work honestly, it's just very, very bizarre.
Kay,
Yes, you,
introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, Kay Young, Faith United Church of Christ in Henderson. You referred to we. I'm fairly new to this area. I'd like to know, who are your collaborators? What departments? I'm sure the City Board of Education, or can you tell me some?
Oh, certainly, in terms of partners, like
who's
United
supporting you?
Way, YMCA, Boys and Girls Club. We have, in the summer, the faith-based churches open up and do Whole Again International, and they feed our children and also provide summer learning. I mean, we partner with anyone.
Good for you.
So and then of course we have wonderful businesses here. P&G has always been out there. Toyota, GE, like I said. We write brands. Strive has done a very nice job of bringing lots of partners to the table. Local universities always approach us. Usually, they've got the grant writing expertise. So we have just wonderful partners here who've truly helped make everything better over the years. But it's still not, but those kinds of grant dollars, for me, it seems like a lot of money, but it's like $1 million a day to keep the district operating. So $5 million doesn't help you with operations.
Are these new collaborations since you came? Some of them? All
Some of them are. Some of them are. And I was fortunate that Strive was just starting that consortium to form when I became superintendent. So it was so nice because Strive invited everyone. So it was a big group like this where you get to interact with folks that, like Success by Six for preschool, Community Action Agency. All of a sudden, everyone was sitting around the table together. That has probably been the biggest advantage to me, just because I got to sit around the Strive table and talk to people I wouldn't get to meet, or I'd have to try to call up individually and set up an appointment. So that truly has been advantageous.
Barbara.
Hi, Barbara Glick, Jewish Community. With the Chicago teachers strike as a background, I'd like you to update us on your relationships between the district and the teaching forces.
Right now it's a little dicey because there was an article in the paper this week. What's really playing out in Chicago and what's happened here in Ohio, another thing that got put into that budget bill that was approved June 30th, and see, the scary part is our teachers don't even realize this. It was put into law that 50% of a teacher's evaluation has to be based on student growth. Also, your evaluations count in hiring and firing decisions, and the only time seniority can come into play is if two evaluations are exactly the same, then seniority rules. So you can understand, and that's what's playing out in Chicago, the same thing's happening. It's not about pay, it's about the accountability and the evaluation. So teachers are terrified of losing their jobs. So we did have 75 teachers at the board meeting Monday night because every Board of Education in the state of Ohio has been told we have to have a policy by next summer that puts 50% student growth on a teacher's evaluation. So our board is starting. So we did say to the teachers, we wouldn't count it this year, but we'd like to create the policy, get started, let's see where you fall. And so if you needed help, we provide PD next summer. So before the next school year starts, where that score is going to count, at least we have provided professional development for you. Now that's what our board's trying to do, and I think that's the right way to go. But CFT say, no, let's wait until next year because they're just so nervous. And I was shocked with the people in the audience. I could tell that they didn't know that state law had changed. They thought it was something we had cooked up. So there's a huge disconnect. So Tuesday morning, I'm meeting with my staff saying, what can we put on our website? And I do weekly messaging. I need to start talking about all the changes in state law to educate our 2,000 teachers because they have no clue that all of this has changed. And they think it's something we're cooking up to say, no, this is what's happening. And that's why in Chicago, everyone's out, not over money. They're just terrified about this. Now, we're fortunate in Ohio that we have value added, so we're not looking just at a regular or just a plain test score, because if that were the case, like the Walnut Hills teachers would all be fine, and let's say the teachers at Hayes Porter would all be fine. They're looking at the value added, where they look at where the child starts in September versus where they are at the end of the year, and have you added a year's worth of growth, or more than a year's worth of growth, or less than a year's worth of growth that will get you into trouble as a teacher. So we do have a value-added calculation in Ohio that Patel for Kids puts out. We don't think we have that yet, and I don't know what the state's going to do with it, but at least we have something other than a raw test score in Ohio. I kind of saw in Chicago they didn't. They were just talking about like tests on Terra Nova, a CAT test, or an Iowa test. And now that is kind of scary. But I don't know a lot about Chicago. I just thought, oh gosh, so you hate to have that in the backdrop when we're been told we have to change our teacher evaluation system.
Jean Crocker Lackner, Cincinnati Friends Meeting. What can individual congregations do? In the suburbs, what are the suburbs?
You know, suburbs are not. Every superintendent of all 614 districts in Ohio were worried. We definitely feel there's a move afoot to defund public education. And that's really what we're looking at. I mean, the charter movement's incredible because, you know, we have 36 charters operating within our boundaries. And, you know, we have lots of buildings, including SCPA. We have to offer all of our buildings. In fact, you know, we've been approached by, you know, Krista Ray and other places wanting to buy our buildings. Cincinnati State wanted the building. We can't sell to anyone until we offer them to all the charters first. So that's a real problem. They get first right of refusal. We can only hold them for 2 years, and some of our buildings we'd like to keep, but that's why you see SCPA on the market right now. But the good news is if no charter, we hope, takes it, then we believe we can move forward with a property sale so it could be used for housing or whatever the community would like, although we are in litigation with that, I think it's that Buckeye Association of Community Schools, a charter organization. So we're not even sure what we can sell and how we can proceed. We're going to do it and then let them litigate because, I mean, just because I feel guilty when buildings, I mean, there's some beautiful old buildings, but you don't feel right when they sit in the community and they're boarded up because they just added the blight. So you'd like to be able to sell them to someone who can improve them and make them better based on what the community wants. But it is a real struggle, and probably talking with your legislatures. Remember, Ohio is basically a rural state. The urbans themselves are in the minority. So even though we talk with our delegation here, it's only a handful of people in the state. And you know, that whole new report card where we think all the urbans will look like will all have an F because they won't count value added, that kind of helps the whole defunding public education piece. We're all really worried. I think 15, 20 years from now, I wonder what we'll have. Will it be basically private and charter and just all kinds of just varying schools? I really, it's an uncomfortable position right now. And you do wonder who is going to educate the poor and the disabled. Because basically that's what's happened to us. We have, like I said, 8,000 students with disabilities that no one else wants. They're so expensive. When you've got to do occupational therapy, physical therapy, a special ed teacher, special transportation in an ambulance, on a gurney, you have to have an LPN for them. There's a huge population of youngsters out there that still need to be taken care of. And right now, most of them are located in your bigger districts because we have the dollars. We have to do it by law. So,
And also housing affects that too.
Tag and then
Mary, I have a question. You cited 8,000 students with disabilities, challenges. When they do a score on the district, do they compensate for that?
you can do an alternate assessment on only 1% of our children. So what happens is hundreds of youngsters, yes, all those scores are counted. I could only exclude 1%. I need about 4% just to cover my autism, traumatic brain injury, and MH kids or MD kids who have multiple handicaps who probably will live in a sheltered environment their whole lives. Yes, those children's test scores count. So it's just real. And that's your struggle. And as our population declines, our special ed children account for a larger percentage of our overall population. So that plays into this too. But you never want to blame
No,
children with
I'm not
disabilities
blaming,
for
but
it. But yes, it's a huge issue.
So, and I really am not blaming, but it doesn't seem quite fair for the public education system when you've got private school systems who can pick and choose.
Those children would never be tested. You're right. And I don't think the public even knows those scores are included. Yes, they are included.
Now, just one follow-up question. Do you use value-added measurement on that 8,000? Are you allowed to use value-added or?
Yes, if you can show improvement. I mean, evaluated would count for all of them. But those what really happens is some youngsters cannot take the pencil and paper test. They're so disabled. So you're allowed to put together a portfolio of their work, but only for 1%. They never harm the child. They'll say the child's proficient, but they demoted from proficient to failing for the district because we have over 1% of our youngsters tested that way. So it hurts the district, but they don't label the child. But yes, we do take a hit for that. Our district has never made adequate yearly progress, and it's because of our special education group. We've been able to do it with our English language learners, but we've never been able to do it because every subgroup has to be proficient, and that's the one subgroup that all these years we've never been able to hit that target. It's actually federal, which is so interesting because when there was a new assistant deputy secretary of education in town, one of our principals said, "This is so unfair, my school would have made it except for," and he says, "Well, the state should change the law." And then we had to cringe and say, "No, it's the federal law." Honestly, I think they picked it out. No one knows. I think they just picked the number. I don't think the people who write the laws have any concept that you could actually have more than 1% of your youngsters with disabilities, but all the big urbans nationwide do. And it was picked out of the air, and quite honestly, you have a lot of special education advocates. It's awkward. They want the same rights for children with disabilities, but at the same time, you're hurting the districts because now it's a failing district, which now is losing funding, and we're the only hope to educate the children. So you feel like saying to them, could you back off a little bit? 1% truly isn't realistic. But that it is what it is, and there's been no reauthorization, and it certainly isn't going to change. So that's it, it's 1%.
Tony?
Just a question back on the levies. Could you just give a little...
Introduce yourself.
I'm Tony Sears with the Archdiocese on the levies.
No superintendent yesterday.
Oh, great. Yeah. We're voting on one of the renewals. There'll be another one coming up soon too. There's 2 emergency operations.
Yes.
Correct. Could you just kind of explain that?
It's nothing, well,
the bigger picture?
the only explanation is it's like a nightmare. We have 2 of those 5-year, I think it was David, you said 2 of those 5-year ones coming up. So, yes, and either next November or the following November, we have to put this is the one that was passed in 8, run out in 13. Then there was one in 9 that runs out in 14. And yes, we have it on the ballot, although technically we were funded not to this December, the next December, but next spring, if we didn't have the renewal on the ballot, we can never start our budget assuming that we're going to have that 51 million. You have to take it out because the state never lets you do a budget based on a levy being on the ballot. The money has to be in the bank. So you have to go out a year ahead of time, or you have to carve it out of your budget and then pray that it passes in November after you've laid everyone off, and then try to put stuff back together. So yes, it is truly horrible. We have a second one, and that one is for more. It's for $65 million. So it's the cycle of those 5-year emergencies suddenly coming due at the worst possible time.
Yeah, could you clarify what would be included in that 50% criteria that now the state is saying we need to be used for future evaluation?
That's what the fight is. The state said 50% 50%, but they said, well, you can look at ODE assessments like the OAA, you can look at Terra Nova, those kinds of things. Also value added, which we have in there. Performance index, which is when you add up all the test scores of all the children, like our performance index was 88.5. Or also, we're fighting with teachers about student learning objectives. The teachers could also have some targets that they develop. So it's a combination of all of those and the percentage. So you can see how the devil's in the details. That 50% is made up of what percentage value added, what percentage performance index, what percentage of standardized tests, what percentage student learning objective created by the teacher. Therein lies the struggle, and that's where we are right now. And it's not pretty, and the state just passed out a booklet on what student learning objectives were last week. So everyone just got it saying, and it basically comes back to the districts will be expected to sort it out themselves.
Okay. Thank you very much. Peg's feeling the pressure of time, so we are going to caucus really quickly on this, talking about the renewal of support, Mark's support of this levy. So Peg's passing it out. If you can caucus with your group. Mary, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Any other instruction, Peg?
Yes, you can support